A millionaire saw his maid, humiliated on a $5 blind date, so he offered a marriage contract. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It was a gray Friday evening in Brooklyn, the kind of night when the rain did not pour but misted soft enough to blur the neon lights, sharp enough to sting the skin. Inside a small diner near Flatbush Avenue, Lucy Evans sat across from a man in a suit too shiny to be humble. Her fingers clutched her purse like a lifeline. She had spent all day cleaning penthouses she would never afford, and tonight her friend convinced her to try something different, a blind date. The man, Mark, looked her up and down, his lips curling as he checked the menu. "So, this is the famous Lucy," he said, his tone syrupy and cruel. "You work for some rich guy, right? Housekeeper or something?" Lucy smiled awkwardly. "Yes, I clean apartments. It is honest work." He laughed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Honest, maybe, but definitely not attractive." A waitress stopped by. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Lucy hesitated, then said softly, "Just water, please." Mark smirked. "Only water? Come on, live a little." He ordered steak, wine, and an appetizer that cost more than Lucy's entire week of groceries. The smell of butter and meat filled the air, and Lucy's stomach tightened. She had exactly $5 in her wallet, enough for a tip if he decided to pay. When the bill arrived, Mark leaned back and grinned. "So, sweetheart, are you paying for your water or should we split it?" Lucy blinked, confused. You thought wrong," he said, tossing the receipt toward her. "You invited me, remember? Women today talk about equality, right? Here's your chance to prove it." A few heads turned. The laughter from another table spread like wildfire. Lucy reached into her bag, trembling. She placed her last $5 bill on the table. Her eyes glistened, but she refused to cry. Mark leaned forward. A $5 woman for a $5 date. Perfect match. And that was when someone from the next booth stood up. The air shifted, a quiet drop of tension before a storm. Luke Carter, tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, turned his gaze toward the scene. He had been reviewing emails on his phone, barely aware of the world around him. But that sentence of $5 woman pierced something deep inside him. Without saying a word, he placed his credit card on the waitress's tray. "Put the bill on me," he said calmly, "and bring her a real meal." Mark scoffed. "Who the hell are you?" Luke looked at him, eyes like polished steel. Someone who does not measure people by their wallet. The diner went silent. The waitress hurried away, and Mark, red with embarrassment, mumbled something and left. Lucy sat frozen, mortified. "You did not have to do that," she whispered. Luke's tone softened. "I know." He looked at her hands rough, reddened from hours of cleaning. But some things should not be ignored. He stood to leave, pulling his coat tight against the rain. Lucy called after him, voice trembling, "Wait, why would a stranger help me?" Luke paused by the door, the neon reflection glinting across his face. "Maybe," he said, "because no one ever helped me when I needed it most. Gozar." And with that he disappeared into the night, leaving behind a woman clutching her $5 bill and a story that was only just beginning. But tell me, if you were in Lucy's place, would you have accepted his help or walked away with your pride? The rain had not stopped all night. By morning, the streets of Brooklyn were slick with reflections of gray clouds. Lucy Evans walked quickly, clutching her coat close, the $5 bill still folded in her pocket like a bruise she could not forget. She was late for work at the Carter penthouse, the grand apartment she cleaned 3 times a week for her quiet, distant employer, Mr. Luke Carter. When she entered, the marble floor gleamed, and the smell of cedar hung in the air. She placed her wet umbrella by the door and whispered, "Good morning, Mr. Carter," even though she knew he never replied. He was usually hidden behind the glass wall of his home office, surrounded by files and screens, a man whose face rarely changed expression. Today, however, when Lucy peeked toward his study, she saw something unusual. He was sitting perfectly still, staring at a half-finished cup of coffee, lost in thought. Luke Carter had not slept much. The scene from the diner replayed in his mind over and over, the sound of laughter, the way that arrogant man had called Lucy a $5 woman. He had stepped in without thinking, but the look in her eyes haunted him. There was defiance there, quiet dignity. Most people, when humiliated, collapsed. She had not. She had stood up straight and walked out into the rain. That morning, as Lucy dusted the bookshelves, Luke opened the door to his office. "Miss Evans," he said. Lucy nearly dropped the feather duster. "Yes, sir?" He hesitated. "Do you have a moment?" His stomach tightened. Had she done something wrong? She wiped her hands on her apron and followed him into the office. Luke motioned for her to sit, but she remained standing. He looked at her directly for the first time. "I owe you an apology," he began. She frowned, confused. "For what?" "For stepping into your private business last night. I did not mean to embarrass you." Lucy shook her head. "You did not. You helped me, even if it did not feel good to be seen that way." Luke studied her carefully. She spoke with the honesty of someone who had nothing left to lose. He leaned back, fingers steepled. "Do you ever wish life gave second chances?" She let out a short laugh. "Every day, Mr. Carter, but second chances are expensive." Her answer stayed with him long after she left the room. That afternoon, Luke attended a board meeting. His assistant whispered news that made his jaw tighten. The press was spreading rumors about his broken engagement to socialite Emily Ross. The tabloids called him the cold billionaire who cannot love. His shareholders demanded he clean up his public image before the next investor gala. Back in his car, he looked at his reflection in the tinted window. For the first time in years, Luke felt cornered. A public scandal, a company at risk, and a lonely penthouse filled with silence. He thought of Lucy again, the way she had faced cruelty with quiet grace. She was everything his world lacked: sincerity, warmth, humility. When Lucy returned home to her small apartment that night, she found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a business card embossed in silver letters: Luke Carter, Carter Holdings. Beneath it, a handwritten note. "I would like to discuss a proposal. Meet me at the Beaumont Hotel, 7 p.m. Her heart pounded. Why would her billionaire employer send her such a message? Was this about work or something else? She almost tore the card in half, but curiosity won. At exactly 7, she stepped into the golden lobby of the Beaumont. The chandeliers shimmered, and the marble floor reflected her nervous footsteps. Luke was waiting in a corner booth, a file folder beside him. He stood as she approached. "Miss Evans," he said evenly. "Please, sit." Lucy sat stiffly. "Why am I here, sir?" He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a document, neat and legal-looking. "I have a proposition. A 6-month arrangement. You will act as my wife publicly. In return, I will provide you with financial stability and enough money to open the flower shop you dream of." Lucy blinked, stunned. "A marriage contract? That sounds insane." Luke's expression did not change. "It is strictly business. No affection required. You need money. I need credibility. We can help each other." She stared at the paper, her heart racing. "And if I refuse?" Luke's voice softened. "Then nothing changes. You go back to your life, and I go back to mine." Quote. He paused, then added quietly, "But something tells me you want a second chance as much as I do." The waiter poured water between them, the sound loud in the heavy silence. Lucy looked down at the pen resting beside the contract. The ink shimmered under the light, waiting. "Would you sign a deal like that if it promised to change your life forever?" Lucy stared at the contract, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. The black ink of Luke Carter's signature already glistened at the bottom, bold and precise. He had signed before her, as if he knew she would agree. The words swam before her eyes: temporary union, confidential, 6 months. She read them again and again, trying to understand how her life had gone from cleaning his penthouse to being offered marriage, even a fake one. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why me, Mr. Carter?" Luke leaned back in his chair. "Because you are the only person I can trust to be honest. You have no interest in fame, and you owe me nothing. You have integrity, Miss Evans, and that is rarer than gold in my world." Lucy's pulse thudded in her ears. She wanted to laugh, or maybe cry. "You barely know me," she said. "I know enough," Luke replied calmly. "You kept your dignity when others mocked you. That is something most people cannot buy." The waiter returned, setting down 2 cups of coffee. Luke gestured toward them. "Drink, then decide." For a long time Lucy sat silently. She thought about the rent she could not pay, her mother's medical bills, the dream she had scribbled on the back of an old receipt: Flower Dream Shop. The folder lay open before her, the promise of a new life hidden beneath its pages. Still, it felt wrong, too strange, too risky. "What will people say when they find out you married your maid?" she asked, her voice shaking. Luke's expression hardened. "They will not find out. This marriage will be legal on paper but private in practice. You will live in my home, attend events when required, and follow the conditions inside that file. Lucy flipped through the pages. There were 6 clear rules. No public affection, unless necessary. Attend 5 official events. Maintain discretion about the arrangement. No personal interference in his business life. No media interviews. At the end of 6 months, both parties walk away with no claim on the other. Her fingers lingered on the last line. No claim on the other. Luke noticed her hesitation. You will also receive $200,000 in full support to open your shop, he added. The number made her dizzy. It was more money than she could ever imagine. Her heart screamed no, but her mind whispered yes. She looked up at him. And if I break one of the rules? Then the contract ends, Luke said quietly. And so does the opportunity. Lucy bit her lip. You really think people can fake love and get away with it? He held her gaze. In my world, people fake everything. Why should love be different? For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the hotel lobby, the clinking of glasses, the low jazz playing in the background, it all seemed to blur together. Finally, Lucy picked up the pen. Her hand trembled as she wrote her name beside his. When the ink dried, she exhaled, feeling both terrified and free. Luke closed the folder and nodded once. Our agreement begins tomorrow. My driver will pick you up at 10. She stood, smoothing her dress. What am I supposed to call you now? Luke paused before answering. For the public, husband. Privately, Mr. Carter will do. He rose, offering his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was firm, his palm warm. It felt less like a handshake and more like a binding spell. As Lucy walked out of the hotel, the night air felt different, thicker, charged. She could not tell if she had made the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest choice she would ever make. Behind her, Luke watched through the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. He whispered to himself, let us see if honesty can survive a lie. Now, let me ask you something. If you were offered a contract marriage with no strings attached, only promises on paper, would you sign it, or walk away and risk losing everything? The following morning arrived with the sharp chill of late autumn. Lucy Evans woke before sunrise, her heart racing as if it were trying to remind her of the decision she had made the night before. The contract lay folded on her nightstand, the black ink of her name staring back at her like a mirror she could not look away from. At exactly 10 o'clock, a sleek black car stopped in front of her small apartment. The driver, dressed in a gray suit, stepped out and opened the door with practiced formality. Miss Evans, he said, Mr. Carter asked me to take you to the penthouse. The ride through Manhattan felt endless. The closer they got to the glass towers of Midtown, the smaller she felt. When they finally stopped, Lucy found herself in front of Carter Tower, a 40-story symbol of power that seemed to scrape the clouds. She had cleaned many apartments in her life, but this was different. This was a kingdom. Inside, Luke Carter was already waiting. He stood by the tall window, his reflection framed by the skyline. He turned slightly when she entered. You are early, he said. I did not want to be late, she answered softly. His eyes flicked to the envelope in her hand. Keep it. You will need it for reference. He handed her another folder, slimmer and embossed with his initials. This contains your wardrobe list, schedule, and the itinerary for the next 7 days. My assistant Dana will help you prepare. Lucy opened it, blinking. Wardrobe list? Luke's tone was steady. If you are going to play the role of my wife, you will need to look the part. Tonight we will attend a charity gala. Reporters will be there. We need to appear convincing. Her throat went dry. Convincing? She repeated. Dana entered at that moment, a graceful woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. Let us begin, Mrs. Carter, she said warmly, as if the title were not borrowed. Lucy froze for a second at the sound of it. Mrs. Carter. It felt heavy, unreal. For the next several hours, the penthouse turned into a whirlwind of fabric, jewelry, and camera flashes. Designers arrived with racks of dresses. Stylists argued about colors. Lucy sat in front of the mirror, watching a stranger slowly appear, hair perfectly curled, lips painted in a soft rose shade, a gown that shimmered under the light like liquid gold. Luke entered quietly, his gaze steady but unreadable. You clean up well, he said. She forced a smile. Thank you, sir. Luke, he corrected gently. You should get used to saying it. That single word felt like crossing a line she was not ready for. She lowered her eyes. Luke, she said softly, testing the name like a secret. By evening, they arrived at the gala. Flashbulbs burst the moment they stepped out of the car. Reporters shouted questions. Lucy's arm tightened around Luke's. He leaned closer and whispered, "Just smile. Do not answer anything." They entered the ballroom, flooded with light, laughter, and money. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars. Everywhere Lucy looked, there were people in diamonds and tuxedos. She moved carefully, aware of every camera flash that followed them. An older man approached, one of Luke's board members. "Mr. Carter," he said with a sly grin. "So this is your mysterious bride. Quite a surprise." Luke smiled politely. Life is full of surprises. The man turned to Lucy. "Tell me, Mrs. Carter, do you know how to handle a room full of investors?" Lucy hesitated, then said clearly, "No, but I do know how to handle a room full of dust and still make it shine." "Go." The man blinked. For a moment, silence rippled through the group, then a soft chuckle escaped from someone nearby. Luke's lips twitched in amusement. Later, as the night wound down, Luke leaned close and murmured, "You handled that perfectly." Lucy exhaled slowly. "I just told the truth." He smiled faintly. That is why it worked. As the cameras flashed one last time, Lucy realized something strange. She had not felt humiliated tonight. For the first time, she had been seen. And yet, a quiet voice inside her whispered, "You may be wearing a crown, but it is made of paper." The limo door closed behind them, the city lights reflecting on the glass. Neither spoke for a long while. But in the silence, something had shifted. By the time they reached home, Lucy no longer felt like the maid she once was. She felt like someone walking a tightrope between two worlds, one built on truth and one built on a lie. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of the Carter penthouse, painting everything in gold. The gala had made headlines overnight. Every major outlet in New York carried the same photo. Luke Carter, the cold, untouchable billionaire, standing beside a mysterious young woman in a golden gown. The headline read, "Carter's secret bride, who is she?" Lucy Evans sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the screen of Luke's tablet, her heart pounding. It was surreal to see her own face on a news site. Dana walked in carrying a folder. "Congratulations, Mrs. Carter," she said lightly. "You broke the internet." Lucy groaned, covering her face. "They are going to find out who I really am." Dana smiled knowingly. "Let them guess. You were poised, polite, and beautiful. No one would believe you were ever a maid." Before Lucy could respond, Luke appeared from the hallway, already dressed in a dark suit. His phone buzzed nonstop. He looked tired but controlled, the way only a man used to crisis could appear. "Do not read those articles," he said, noticing the tablet. "They are poison." "I know," he cut in gently. "But remember, this arrangement only works if you keep your composure." He poured himself a cup of coffee, then paused. "You did well last night. My board members were impressed." Lucy looked up. "Even the one who tried to insult me?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Especially him." Quote. She laughed softly, the tension in her shoulders easing for the first time. "Then I suppose I passed the first test." Luke nodded. "You did." Later that afternoon, Lucy found herself accompanying Luke to a lunch meeting at a luxury hotel. She was nervous again, her hands cold even through her gloves. As they walked through the lobby, whispers followed them. That is them, the billionaire and his new wife. At the private dining room, they were greeted by a small group of executives and one woman whose presence filled the room. She was stunning tall, confident, her hair perfectly styled. Lucy instantly recognized her from the magazines. Emily Ross, Luke's ex-fiancée. "Luke?" Emily said, her tone smooth as glass. "You move quickly." Luke's jaw tightened, but his expression remained polite. "Emily." Her eyes drifted to Lucy, studying her like a rare insect. "So this is your new arrangement." Quote. Lucy forced a polite smile. "Nice to meet you, Miss Ross." Emily tilted her head. "Tell me, Mrs. Carter, what exactly do you do?" Lucy hesitated. "I help manage household matters." "So, a maid-turned-wife," Emily said sweetly. "That is quite the promotion." The words landed like a slap. For a moment, Lucy could not breathe. But then she remembered the rules: no public scenes. Maintain composure. She smiled, calm but sharp. "Yes, and I take my work seriously. After all, a clean house is easier to live in than a dirty heart." The table went silent. One of the executives coughed to hide a laugh. Luke's gaze met hers, a spark of pride in his eyes. Emily's smile faltered for just a second before she looked away. After the meeting, as they walked out, Luke said quietly, "That was impressive." Lucy exhaled. "I did not plan it. It just came out." You handled her better than I ever did, he admitted. For a moment they shared a silence that was not awkward but electric. The city traffic roared outside, but all Lucy could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. That night, when they returned home, Luke found her on the balcony, staring at the skyline. You know, she said softly, this whole thing is starting to feel real. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her. Does that scare you? A little, she confessed. Because the moment it feels real, I remember it is not. Quote. Luke said nothing. He simply stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to a breath. Maybe, he said quietly, some lies become true if we believe in them long enough. Lucy turned to face him, the city lights flickering in her eyes. For the first time, she could not tell if his words were part of the contract or something far more dangerous. Rain returned to New York the following evening, tapping gently against the penthouse windows like a reminder that nothing gold lasts forever. The city lights blurred in the drizzle, turning the skyline into streaks of amber and gray. Inside, Luke Carter sat in his study, the glow from his computer screen casting sharp shadows across his face. He was reading a report but not absorbing a single word. His mind kept drifting to the way Lucy had faced his ex-fiancé without flinching, to the way her laugh had cut through the stiffness of that lunch like sunlight through a storm. He closed his laptop and rubbed his temples. Something about her unsettled him. She was supposed to be part of a plan, a solution to a public problem, yet she was becoming a distraction he could not ignore. Outside, Lucy was in the living room, barefoot, standing by the piano. She touched the keys softly, the sound fragile and beautiful. She did not notice him watching from the doorway. That piece? Luke said quietly. Beethoven? Lucy jumped, startled. You scared me. Yes, I learned it when I was little. My mother said music was the cheapest kind of magic. Luke smiled faintly. She was right. He moved closer. Play again. Lucy hesitated. You really want to hear it? He nodded, so she played. The melody filled the room, warm and melancholic, winding around them like invisible silk. For a moment, the world outside the rain, the headlines, the noise disappeared. When the last note faded, Lucy looked up, half embarrassed. I am sorry. I did not mean to disturb you. You did not, Luke said softly. It has been a long time since this place felt alive. She turned toward the window, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes I forget this is all pretend. Then I remember and it hurts a little. Luke looked at her, the confession pulling something deep from him. I forget too, he admitted. A quiet pause stretched between them, delicate as glass. Why did you never marry for real? She asked suddenly. Luke's expression changed, a shadow crossing his features. Because the last time I tried, I was not enough. Lucy frowned. Not enough? He looked at her then, his eyes raw, unguarded. Not enough to be loved for who I am, instead of what I have. She did not speak. The honesty in his voice left her motionless. For the first time, she saw not a billionaire, but a man who had been left behind by trust. Later, when she went to her room, she stood before the mirror, still in her evening dress. Her reflection no longer looked like the maid from Brooklyn. Yet the woman staring back seemed just as unsure, caught between illusion and desire. Luke knocked lightly at her door. Lucy, he said, his tone careful. There is something I should tell you. The press might come after you again. Emily has friends in the tabloids. Lucy met his eyes through the half-open door. Let them. I survived worse than words. He looked at her for a long time before saying quietly, You make me forget why I built walls in the first place. She smiled sadly. Maybe that is what walls are for, to see who is brave enough to climb them. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The air felt charged, the kind of stillness that happens before a storm or a confession. Then Luke took a step back. Good night, Lucy. Good night, Luke. When the door closed, Lucy pressed her hand to her chest. She could still feel the echo of his voice there. In his own room, Luke stood by the window, watching the city glow beneath the rain. For the first time in years, he wondered if his loneliness had finally met its match. Tell me, do you believe that two people pretending to be together can accidentally fall in love for real, or is that just another story we tell ourselves when the heart forgets the rules? The next week arrived with cold wind and sharper whispers. Every business site and gossip column in New York carried the same photo: Luke Carter and his mysterious wife, walking out of the charity gala. At first, the attention seemed harmless, but then the tone shifted. Rumors spread like wildfire. She is not who she says she is, one headline claimed. Another called her the maid who married a millionaire. Lucy Evans saw them all. She tried to ignore the comments online, the endless speculation, but each word felt like a tiny cut. She had expected curiosity, not cruelty. By Tuesday morning, reporters were stationed outside the building, their cameras flashing like lightning every time she stepped into the lobby. When she entered the penthouse, Luke was already there, pacing in the living room, his phone pressed to his ear. "I told you to pull that story," he snapped. "Find out who leaked it." He ended the call, his jaw tight. When he looked at her, his expression softened, but only slightly. "Lucy, I am sorry. Someone must have sold information about you to the press." She set her bag down. "They found out I used to clean houses, Luke. That is not a crime." "It is not," he said firmly. "But the board is worried. Investors hate scandal." Lucy crossed her arms, her voice trembling but steady. "You mean they hate that their perfect billionaire married someone like me?" He sighed. "You know it is not about that." "Then what is it about?" She shot back. "Your image? Your reputation?" He looked away. Silence stretched like a wall between them. Finally, he said quietly, "I built this company from nothing. I cannot let it collapse because people want a story." "Core." Lucy felt her throat tighten. "Then end the contract. I will disappear. It was never real anyway." Luke turned sharply. "Do not say that." "Why not? It is true." He took a step closer. "Because it feels real, and that terrifies me." Before either of them could say more, Dana rushed in, holding her phone. "Luke, it is worse," she said. "Emily went on television this morning. She told everyone the marriage is fake." Luke's eyes darkened. "She what?" Dana nodded. "She hinted that you paid Lucy to play your wife. The clip is going viral." Lucy felt the blood drain from her face. Her worst fear had become public entertainment. "So that is it," she whispered. "I am your scandal now." Luke's voice hardened. "I will fix this." "How?" she asked. "By buying silence again? By pretending a lie into truth?" He stepped closer, his tone low but urgent. "Lucy, I will not let them destroy you." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You cannot protect me from what I am. You said it yourself, people in your world fake everything. Maybe I was foolish to think we were the exception." She turned and walked away before he could answer. The elevator doors closed between them, reflecting Luke's expression anger mixed with something dangerously close to regret. That night, the penthouse felt colder than ever. Luke stood alone in his study, staring at the headlines glowing on the screen. Carter's marriage scandal, was it all a lie? He closed the laptop and pressed his hands against his eyes. Down on the street, Lucy stood in the rain, no umbrella this time, watching the city blur around her. She thought of how far she had come from a diner and a $5 bill to the front page of a magazine. And yet, she felt smaller than ever. She took off her wedding ring, held it in her palm and whispered, "Maybe this was never mine to wear." Then she turned and walked toward the subway, leaving the glittering tower behind. In the penthouse above, Luke realized what her absence meant. The contract might have begun as a deal, but somewhere along the way, his heart had rewritten the terms. Sometimes it takes losing someone to understand how real the lie had become. 3 days passed. The city kept moving, but for Luke Carter, time seemed to stop. His penthouse, once a symbol of control, now felt like a cage made of glass and silence. Every corner reminded him of Lucy Evans. The faint trace of her perfume still lingered in the hallway, and the empty space by the piano mocked him each night. He had spent years mastering damage control, but this was different. This was not a business crisis. This was loss. The tabloids were still circling, each headline sharper than the last. Carter's contract bride vanishes. The maid who fooled a millionaire. In the chaos, Luke made a decision that surprised even himself. He canceled all meetings, shut off his phone, and drove to the only place he thought Lucy might go, Brooklyn. The rain had stopped, but puddles glimmered under the morning sun as he walked through the narrow streets. He found her where it had all begun, at the small diner near Flatbush Avenue. She sat alone in a corner booth, her hair pulled back, wearing a plain coat that did not belong to the world of penthouses and black cars. She looked up when he entered, her eyes widening slightly, but she did not speak. Luke approached slowly. "You left without saying goodbye." Lucy's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "Goodbye was part of the deal, remember?" He sat across from her. "Forget the deal." She shook her head. "I cannot. The deal is what started this. It is also what ruined it." Luke leaned forward, his voice low. "The deal did not ruin anything. Lies did. Mine. I thought I could control everything, even feelings. But I was wrong." Lucy looked away, staring out the window. "The press tore me apart, Luke. Do you know what it feels like to be called a liar for something you never asked for?" Yes, he said softly, because I lived the same lie. For a long moment, there was only the sound of clinking cups and distant conversation. Then Luke placed a small envelope on the table. This is the deed to the flower shop property you wanted. It is yours, free and clear. No conditions. She froze. Why would you do that? Because you earned it long before you met me. Her throat tightened. You cannot fix everything with money. I know, he said. That is why I am not asking you to come back for the contract. I am asking you to come back because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Pudding. Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. You think one grand gesture makes up for everything? No, Luke said, but it is a start. At that exact moment, a familiar sound buzzed from Luke's pocket. His assistant Dana had texted, "The board is in chaos. Emily's story is unraveling. They want you to speak publicly." Luke looked at Lucy. There is a press gala tonight. I am going to tell them the truth. She frowned. What truth? That I fell in love with someone the world thinks I should be ashamed of, and that I am done pretending. That evening, cameras flashed across the ballroom once again, but this time, Luke stood alone on stage. The crowd murmured as he began to speak. Months ago, I made a mistake, he said, his voice steady. I created a lie to protect my reputation. In doing so, I hurt the only person who ever showed me honesty. The audience hushed. Flashbulbs burst. I did not marry for status, Luke continued. I married a woman who taught me the meaning of dignity. If that makes me a fool, so be it. From the back of the room, Lucy watched silently, tears shining in her eyes. Luke's gaze found hers. Lucy Evans, this is not a contract anymore. It is a confession. The room erupted in whispers, but all Lucy heard was her heartbeat. For the first time, the lie had turned into truth, and the truth felt like freedom. The ballroom fell silent. For a heartbeat, Luke Carter stood alone beneath the chandelier's light, surrounded by the hum of disbelief. Reporters stopped taking notes. Cameras hovered, waiting for the fallout, but he did not flinch. He looked toward the back of the room, his eyes fixed on Lucy Evans. The master of ceremonies cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Carter, are you confirming that your marriage was not a business contract? Luke smiled faintly. No, I am confirming that it started as one, but it became something real. The crowd gasped. Flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. Luke continued, his voice steady and calm. The woman you see in those photos, the one everyone calls a maid or a scandal, is the most honest person I have ever met. She showed me that love is not about appearances, but about courage, and if my reputation cannot survive that truth, then it is a reputation I do not want. He stepped down from the stage. The audience parted instinctively as he crossed the room. Lucy's hands trembled around the small clutch she carried. She had never felt so exposed, or so seen. When Luke reached her, he did not hesitate. I do not expect forgiveness, he said softly. But I will never stop telling the truth about what you mean to me. Lucy's throat tightened. You just told the entire world. Good, he said. Now it is your turn to believe it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was not a diamond ring, but something far simpler. A delicate silver band engraved with a single word, truth. 6 months ago, Luke said, his voice low enough that only she could hear, I asked you to sign a contract. Today, I am asking for something different. He took her hand and dropped to one knee, ignoring the murmurs and the camera flashes. Lucy Evans, will you marry me for real? No terms, no rules, just us. Tears blurred her vision. She thought of every moment that had brought her here, the $5 bill, the fake smiles, the storm of headlines, the heartbreak, and the small acts of kindness that had survived through it all. Yes, she whispered, but only if we build this on honesty, not fear. Luke smiled, his eyes bright for the first time in years. Then we already have everything we need. Applause broke out, first hesitant, then thunderous. Reporters lowered their cameras. For once, the story was not about wealth or scandal, but redemption. A few weeks later, the world moved on. The tabloids lost interest, and the headlines faded. But in a quiet corner of Brooklyn, a new shop opened, Flower Dream by Lucy Evans. The window was filled with wildflowers and roses, and above the door hung a small wooden sign engraved with the same word that was written inside her wedding ring. Truth. One morning, Luke stopped by before heading to work. He wore no tie, just a simple white shirt rolled at the sleeves. He brought coffee and a single red rose. Lucy looked up from arranging tulips and smiled. "You are late?" she teased. "I am exactly on time," he said, placing the cup beside her. "You taught me that some things cannot be rushed." They stood together for a moment, surrounded by the scent of fresh flowers and the sound of soft morning traffic. It was not the life Luke had imagined for himself, but it was the only one that ever felt real. Lucy reached for his hand. "Do you ever miss the old world? The power? The control?" Luke shook his head. "I used to think power meant never needing anyone. Now I know it means having someone who will tell you the truth even when it hurts." She smiled. "Then I suppose we are both powerful now." Outside, a young couple paused to look through the window, pointing at the display of roses. Lucy watched them with quiet joy. "Do you think they believe in love?" she asked. Luke squeezed her hand. "Maybe not yet," he said, "but they will. So tell me, if you were given a second chance, not a contract, not a promise, but a real one, would you take it, even if it meant risking your heart all over again?"